What are some of the saddest scams criminals come up with? Let's get right to it and start with number 5, scamming grandpas. British girl Olivia Crutchley scammed her own grandfather for a period of 18 months to the point where he lost all of his savings. According to the media, Crutchley had told her grandfather she would be using the money for a legal battle she had with her workplace, the DIY company. Crutchley went as far as showing him emails that were allegedly written by lawyers, but it turned out she wasn't involved with the company at all. She had intended to use the money to fund her growing substance overuse, even if it meant lying and stealing from her granddad. So how was Grandpa able to give her a whopping £75,000? Well, he took out 2 different loans, sold his car, and even asked for money from family members, all to help his sweet granddaughter Olivia fund her never-ending legal fees. Although there isn't any technology yet to keep grandkids from scamming their own grandparents, there is technology to keep you from falling prey to identity theft. We can definitely help prevent that from happening thanks to our sponsor today, Surfshark VPN. Surfshark has over 3,200 servers across 100 countries that encrypt your data and shield your online identity by keeping your personal information safe from cyber threats, giving you online security and freedom anywhere you go. On vacation, change your virtual location back to your home country for a taste of familiarity. Unblock content and access global streaming services like Netflix so you can keep watching your favorite shows on the road. Have to log in using public Wi-Fi? Don't fret. Surfshark's encryption secures your data, protecting it from hackers while also blocking ads, trackers, malware, and phishing attempts so that you can browse safely throughout the web. Using Surfshark is like having your own online bodyguard, so let them protect you today by using the code Pablito and clicking on the link in the description below for your first 3 months free. According to Olivia, she'd lost a lot of money after receiving special training for a new position at work that she wasn't being compensated for. In addition, she had to travel to London and Birmingham, all of it paid by her loyal grandfather. Olivia sent her grandfather emails in which her supposed supervisor confirmed the cost of her travels out of the city. He'd initially sent £1,000 for her travel and training. After a while, Olivia informed him that she was no longer working and was planning to sue the company. Crutchley would send him emails from an employee organization detailing how she had to pay fees up front to start her legal process. The legal fees kept on piling on because, according to Crutchley, she had to change lawyers because her legal team was going through a family crisis. At some point, her granddad started receiving emails directly from her alleged lawyers. This is when he became suspicious. Some of the emails detailed very personal details from the lawyer's private life, and the communication didn't even come from an official company email address. The total sum of the money her grandfather sent her and her partner added up to £75,000. After a real legal battle, Crutchley was convicted to 2 years behind bars. Number 4, the Uber scam. An elderly man was conned into a vehicle by 2 individuals who claimed they came from overseas and were working with charities, was then driven to a bank. At the bank, the man withdrew an undisclosed amount of money, a large amount, we'll assume, in a quick transaction that made more than one person suspicious. The scammers that brought him to the bank later drove off with him in the car again. Authorities believe this was some sort of new scam that takes advantage of well-intentioned elderly men and women because they had never seen something like it in the Terrebonne Parish area. While scams that target the elderly seem to be much more common in online scenarios, it's not entirely uncommon to see criminals update their tactics to get a quick buck. While local authorities have stated the money was virtually impossible to trace, they still believe this wasn't a targeted event. All clues lead them to believe the scammers had no previous knowledge of the man and simply approached him when they saw him. A known tactic is to talk about social causes that may warm the hearts of older people. They're the demographic most most likely to cooperate or help out any stranger who says they're related to a local charity. Sometimes these scammers will be so compelling, an older person might even find it hard to say no to a prompt like getting in their car. Authorities said people in the area should be on the lookout for clear red flags that could serve as indicators that potential scammers might be roaming around. If they say they're from out of the country, if they seem to be only approaching older people, they say they work with local charities, and if they tell them they need them to make large transactions, beware. Number 3. Not a bail. A woman looking to help her grandson in Canada was the victim of a major scam that made her lose $10,000 by answering a phone call. Elise, whose last name was kept private, hails from Burlington, Ontario, and received a series of phone calls late one night. The caller told her grandson had been arrested, and the only way to get him out of jail was by paying a $10,000 bail. According to the call she received, her one and only grandson had been arrested, and Elise, taken away by her emotions, immediately went to action. Nothing would stop her, not even a nasty snowstorm currently in the area. Elise was on the phone for almost an hour with the scammers. After convincing her of the situation her grandson was struggling with, scammers sent her a taxi to pick her up and take her directly to the bank. Given how swiftly the taxi showed up, the victim's family suspected it wasn't real. It was likely just a car hired by the scammers. For a 95-year-old woman struggling with a delicate heart condition, getting in a taxi was the most she could do to help her grandson. Once they arrived at the TD Bank branch in Burlington, Elise asked to withdraw a suspicious amount of money. The bank teller attending to her noted how strange it sounded. He even went with her to the car to see who she was with. While the man was still unsure of the whole situation, he withdrew the money and handed it to her. Elise went home without a scratch, but lost $10,000. One of her children, who's her legal representative, spoke to the media about how the bank didn't contact him to oversee the transaction. He acts as her power of attorney, and his name's featured in the bank account, so the bank should have done due diligence and confirmed with him before a transaction this big happened. After finding out the whole ordeal was a scam and Elise was the victim of robbery, she felt incredibly embarrassed, fell for a scam in a moment of deep emotional confusion. According to the woman's family, TD Bank wasn't cooperating with the investigation and even failed to communicate with them. Authorities said they were prohibited from speaking to bank employees regarding the scam. Number 2. The $200,000 text message. An Australian family became one of the most notorious victims of a scam when they lost nearly all of their life savings. Losing everything they had worked hard for over 14 years meant the couple, who were going by the aliases Peter and Madison, and their 2 kids would have to sell their family home and move with relatives. They weren't even able to afford basic cost of living expenses like groceries. The emotional stress of the situation had turned the family into depending on the day-to-day to survive. All of their aspirations were pushed back for at least 10 years. Their daily jobs helped them cover the costs of their mortgage, but it wasn't enough to also buy food. A few months earlier, Madison had received a text message from Suncor stating she had a new payment ID set up for $895. The message didn't really set off any alarms, since it was sent in the same thread they usually receive message from the bank. The message said she needed to call Suncor, an Australian banking and insurance company, if she thought the payment was fraudulent. A phone number was included in the message. This phone number was going to allegedly connect her directly with the bank's fraud department. After a series of security questions were asked, everything seemed to check out. The whole interaction felt extremely legit. The voice over the phone told Madison her account had been hacked. There was even mention of the possibility of someone creating a fake passport and wiping out the whole account to zero. Given how trustworthy the interaction felt, Madison was compelled to comply with the voice was telling her to do, increase the account's transfer limit from $5,000 to $50,000 and transfer all the funds to a newly created bank account. While the original text message came in the same thread of previous messages from the bank, this was in fact a scam. A notorious scheme used nowadays, spoofing, is a technique where scammers overstamp a real phone number to make it look like they're communicating from an official bank number. Over 5 days, Madison received messages in the same message thread informing her of transactions of close to $50,000 that were being made. All of this was approved by her over the phone. Scammers were able to take almost $250,000 before Suncor ultimately froze the account. Once they contacted the bank to understand why their account had been frozen, they received the horrible news. They were victims of fraud. Their whole life savings had been transferred over to a Commonwealth bank account they didn't know. The bank was really quick in denying any responsibility. The money had been transferred by the couple, and the bank wasn't going to repay. The probabilities of getting their money back were close to none. With this in mind, the couple still believed they had been wronged by the bank. After all, they had been their clients for over 28 years. The bank informed them of their decision decision only 4 hours after the couple had presented all of the information regarding the case. Suncor would not take the blame. Added to this, the fraud department hinted that the whole situation was probably caused by Madison's mental state, which made her gullible to fall for a scam like this. This was a response that infuriated Peter, considering his wife had been laying in bed in fetal position for days on end. According to Peter, Commonwealth Bank had blocked the first attempt to transfer the money. They went on to alert Suncor of the scam. But even if the first transfer didn't go through, both Suncor and Commonwealth let through 4 additional transfers. They just seemed to be playing a game of blaming each other without actually taking any accountability. Commonwealth Bank was able to retrieve a bit more than $42,000, but only after the case was officially closed. The family decided to take proper legal action through an Australian Office of Financial Complaints. This added to the fact they decided to join a class action lawsuit against Suncor. Apparently, there were 5 other families that had been affected by similar scams and Suncor's inaction. Some of them lost between $25,000 and $80,000. As a response, Suncor officials said they would lower their interest rate to 1.5%. No repayments of their mortgage for 6 months and $3,000 to cover medical bills. But there is no attribution to their responsibility in the matter whatsoever. Media reports have stated that some of the biggest banks in Australia have been racking up profits of $33 billion a year. The public is now requesting them to sign up an agreement where they comply with paying back money to victims of fraud unless customers were involved in the scam itself. And if you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay tuned right here for our past release on how these hired assistants help to separate money from the people who hired them. Number 1. Compromised emails. Vicky Regal and her daughter Sarah have lost everything. Once upon a time, they were in the process of buying a townhome in their native Colorado. But the idea came to a rapid halt when they realized a terrible mistake. They had sent the money they intended to use to pay for the property to someone else. On closing day for the property, and after signing hundreds of papers, the representative of the title company told them they didn't have the funds. When Regal replied that she had already transferred the money, the big alarm in her head started ringing. Vicky had sent the money to an unrelated bank account belonging to someone who'd hacked email interactions between her and the title company. Vicky and Sarah didn't notice anything suspicious when they started getting the fraudulent emails. In the emails, Vicky was told she had to make the full payment, almost $200,000 in 2 days. She received closing documents with the same date she had been told by the title company. Once the money was transferred, hackers took all of it. When Regal realized she now had no money and was in fact homeless, she broke down. She was so disgusted she even threw up upon hearing the news. The scam, officially known as Business Email Compromise, or BEC for short, is when a person has faked the email of a financial institution in order to transfer funds to an account they have control over. Given the fragile state in which their lives were at the moment, a GoFundMe page was created to try to help them out and raise back the money they lost. The page tells a little bit about their tragic story and how they lost everything they had due to the scam. She wanted to help her expat friends in Dubai by helping them send money to their foreign bank accounts. But instead, she just kept the money. But she probably isn't the worst person to find to help you. That person may just be Gilbert Arenas' assistant who stole close to $7 million from him. The same thing happened to Kevin Hart. His personal assistant stole close to $1 million from him. Number 4. No laughing matter. Crime can happen to anyone. And that's what happened to Kevin Hart. From 2017 to 2019, Kevin Hart was defrauded out of nearly $1 million in unauthorized credit card charges. Crime can happen to anyone. And that's what happened to Kevin Hart. From 2017 to 2019, Kevin Hart was defrauded out of nearly $1 million in unauthorized credit card charges. The scammer was none other than Hart's personal shopper, Dylan Jason Sire, who is trusted with Hart's personal credit card to make purchases. Sire, a Long Island native, owned a personal shopper business in which he charged the actor's credit card with legitimate purchases, but the things he bought weren't always what Hart had in mind. Sire spent about $923,000 of Hart's money and an additional $240,000 on jewelry and watches from a luxury jeweler in California. He spent thousands on fine art and other collective items, including 5 Patek Philippe watches worth more than $400,000. He bought a Sam Friedman painting, 16 Bear Brick collector dolls, 5 Cause collectible dolls, and 2 Louis Vuitton bags. He showed off many of these purchases on his personal Instagram page. Sire and Hart met in 2015 through his personal shopping business, Sire Consulting, LLC. He was hired to make several purchases for the actor and was given his personal credit card under the assumption that he would only make authorized purchases. By the time Hart uncovered the year-and-a-half-long scam, he was out more than $1 million. The cops kicked in his door to serve a search warrant in February 2021. They recovered about $250,000 worth of cash and goods. Sire was arraigned and charged with a laundry list of fraud and theft charges and potentially faces up to 25 years in prison. The Queens County District Attorney warned that no one, not even celebrities like Kevin Hart, are immune to scams. Number 3. Almost a Hilton. Renata Shamrakova, the personal assistant to Nikki Hilton's ex-husband, spent nearly $1.6 million of his money on elite Amex, on shopping sprees, and exotic vacations. She conned Todd Meister while she worked for him at his Upper East Side townhouse in Manhattan. Neighbors started noticing piles of packages showing up at Renata's door. They were later discovered to contain high-end jewelry with expensive rings, necklaces, and bracelets. She also used his credit card to purchase airline tickets and fund her travel abroad. She covered her tracks by paying off the $800,000 credit card bill using Meister's JP Morgan checking account and transferring the funds to American Express. At the heart of the story, we have Nikki Hilton, Todd Meister, and of course, Renata Shamrakova. Nikki Hilton is an American businesswoman, socialite, model, and fashion designer, but she's probably most known for being Paris Hilton's younger sister and fellow heir to the Hilton family fortune. Born into the wealthy Hilton family, she continued her streak of inherited wealth by marrying into the Rothschild family through James Rothschild in 2015. Paris was Nikki's maid of honor, and they honeymooned in Botswana after the wedding. Before that, Nikki married Todd Meister. He was a football star at the uppity Riverdale Country School before going on to Harvard to get a degree in business. Then, Todd started a company in the mid-90s dedicated to investing in internet startups. He sold the company in 2000 and started working as a hedge fund manager while still finding time to party. Meister was Nikki's longtime friend before they started dating on and off in 2003. Nikki was just a kid when she married Meister, but he treated her like gold and they had great chemistry. Her parents were thrilled about the wedding. The ceremony was held in August 2004 at a Las Vegas wedding chapel. Nikki wore an aqua blue silk dress and Meister donned a button-down shirt and pants. Paris witnessed the vows along with Bijou Phillips and comedian Jeff Beecher. But not everyone was convinced it would last. Meister's friends guessed it was a publicity stunt that would get annulled 3 days later. Unfortunately for the couple, he wasn't so far from the truth. The marriage was annulled 3 months later, with the couple saying they got married on a whim. According to friends of the couple, they tried to give their marriage a fair shot, but it just wasn't meant to be. But while he was distracted being the newest member of the Hilton family, his personal assistant was stealing his Amex. Renata used his banking information to apply for an American Express credit card in his name and then added herself as a secondary user. In April 2011, the Ukrainian woman got too comfortable with her new boss and went on a wild spending spree. She sent the items to her apartment in Chelsea on 21st Street. Many of the purchases included pricey jewelry and exotic vacations. By the time her swindling days were over, she had stolen nearly $1 million from Meister. Unfortunately, Meister didn't notice the stolen funds for 10 months. He notified police in January 2012, and Renata was arrested 4 days later. She was charged with grand larceny, criminal possession of stolen property, identity theft, and forgery, and held on Rikers Island for a $100,000 bond. Her parents even tried to sell their home to help their daughter avoid jail. Renata also started a social media campaign to pay back the money she owed to Meister, but it was less than successful, raising a grand total of $335. She took the stand at the Manhattan Supreme Court in December 2013, where she pleaded guilty to felony grand larceny. She was sentenced up to 3 years behind bars. The defense team requested that she stay at Rikers Island, but the judge denied this motion and sent her to a prison in upstate New York. Number 2. Play money. Ex-NBA star Gilbert Arenas found out of the blue, that his trusted personal assistant, John A. White, scammed him out of roughly $7 million in Arenas' estimation. However, on court docs, Arenas could only prove around $2.1 million. Arenas only found out when he started noticing discrepancies in one of his bank accounts where he would have what he called a play money bank account. White had given himself unauthorized access to this specific play money bank account that Arenas used basically as a petty cash account. Whenever Gilbert needed, for example, $20,000 for a weekend trip to Miami, Arenas would have White call up Arenas' money manager and have him transfer the money to Gilbert's play money bank account. Then the money would be in there for Arenas to use. But White went on and abused this power by telling Arenas' money manager that Arenas would need money for a made-up purchase. And as soon as that money would touch the play money account, White would transfer that money into his own bank account. So Arenas would never see the discrepancy in the balance, and the money manager would never follow up with Arenas since White was his personal assistant. At the height of Arenas' career, Arenas' assistant was stealing millions of dollars by transferring money from Arenas' bank account into his own. He spent the money on a home in Florida, a Ferrari, and a Range Rover. White was found guilty and sentenced to 57 months in federal prison and 2 years of supervised release. The judge banned him from opening or using any credit cards without his probation officer's permission. White asked for a retrial when new evidence emerged that could change his guilty conviction. Many witnesses came forward with statements that Arenas was aware of the big transactions White was making on his behalf. White also found signed forms from the bank showing that Arenas was fully aware of these transactions. People close to Arenas came forward to say that the NBA star was known to spend carelessly, like when he bought a home for one of his girlfriends in Florida. The scammer accused Arenas of lying when he said White wasn't authorized to make these big purchases. Then there are Arenas' Instagram posts that seem to brag about defrauding American Express by not paying his tab at a gentleman's club. Still, the judge wasn't convinced. He rejected White's request for a retrial, saying this new evidence didn't suggest innocence and wasn't relevant to the criminal case. Number 1. Forex fun. Katie Blaymeyer moved to the United Arab Emirates in 2011 to start working as a physical education teacher at an international school where she taught a British curriculum. She was born and raised in Lancashire, England, but moved after her mother died in 2008. When her 5-year contract ended at the international school in UAE, Blaymeyer started doing private swimming lessons for the children of wealthy locals in their personal pools. Then, she got a Facebook message that invited her into a life of crime. Someone asked her if she was looking for work, hoping she would be able to swap their Emirati dirhams for another currency at a better rate than what the banks offer. At first, it didn't seem to be a problem. Blaymeyer, a staple in the Dubai party scene, did these currency exchanges for a while. A driver picked up the sender's money and brought it to Blaymeyer. Then she'd exchange it for cash in her British bank account. She offered reasonable rates, and there weren't any problems until things snowballed and went totally wrong. During the pandemic, she saw the opportunity to rip off many expats, especially Emirates airline crew members and pilots who had been laid off and were desperate for better exchange rates. She used fake names like Imogen Smith and Don Smith to lure them in. Her clients thought she was genuine until they realized their money wasn't being returned. One businessman, Mr. Osman, said he lost £42,000 to Blaymeyer after using her services to expand his kebab business. She told him she was pregnant and wanted to get rid of her dirhams so she could return to her husband in the UK, a win-win for them both. But then she disappeared. Osman spent 2 stressful, sleepless weeks trying to get in touch with her. When he confided in some friends, they told him that Blaymeyer had a reputation for scams. An Australian air hostess lost £6,500 after trying to send money back home to put a deposit down on a house. A Spanish pilot said he lost £22,000 trying to send money home to pay for his father's funeral. He saw Blaymeyer's posts in an airline Facebook group and assumed she worked in the industry. He trusted her. The deal was supposed to save him £250 in bank fees, but the money never arrived in his account in Madrid. Blaymeyer met his wife and kids and was friendly to the whole family. The pilot never knew she was capable of such heartlessness. She also scammed a British pilot out of £50,000, a Belgian cabin crew member out of of £20,000 and a French airline worker out of £18,000. WhatsApp messages show the dozens of excuses she used to explain why the victims never received their money. A Dubai resident sent her £28,000 as an investor to develop a food ordering app. Blameyer spent £2,000 on software development but never developed the app. The investors never saw his money. When victims tried to get their money back, Blameyer threatened them. She wasn't allowed to leave Lancashire until she paid back the debts owed to her swimming class business partner Alex Campbell, who took her to court after he invested £15,000 in her company, Float UAE, in exchange for a job. When Campbell tried to cash a security check for his investment, it bounced. At least 20 people filed complaints to the police, and Blameyer was arrested and jailed on Christmas Eve 2019. After a civil court case, a travel ban was placed, preventing Blameyer from leaving Dubai. The court instated a repayment plan and put her on the no-fly list. She was released from jail after repaying the debt that caused a previous check to bounce. Meanwhile, she blamed multiple people up the chain of command for all the money that had mysteriously vanished and denied that she was operating a scam. She said she used £100,000 of her personal savings to repay some victims, leaving 8 victims who owed a total of £80,000. According to Blameyer, she's the real victim here, saying she's been blackmailed and received death threats. Sometimes she even blamed the bank for the mix-ups that caused her to serve jail time. Click here to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section what you think is a bigger problem, the growing number of scammers or global warming.